and welcome to CrossTalk. I'm Peter Lavelle. A currency in crisis and under siege. What does the future hold for the euro? Is it destined to be a weak currency, or is it time to seriously consider ending this monumental monetary experiment? To discuss the future of the euro, I'm joined by Jon Gaunt in Birmingham. He's the UK spokesperson for the EU Referendum Campaign. And in London, we cross to Rodney Shakespeare. He is one of the founders of the Global Justice Movement. And another member of our CrossTalk team, Yela Nahanga. All right, gentlemen, CrossTalk rules are in effect, so you can jump in anytime you want. If I can go to you, Rodney, first. Is the EU's euro, is it facing a fork in the road? Meaning either reassess the entire project or, and this will get John even more wound up, is they have to go to the fiscal side. It's a monetary union, but the fiscal side is empty. So really, to make it make sense, fiscal side, that means somebody in Brussels determines all of the budgets of member countries. It's an either-or proposition right now, because over the last few weeks, this crisis is going on. No one's come up with any solid ideas outside of a lunatic idea called a Eurobond, or a new E-bond. What do you think, Rodney? Are we at the fork in the road?
Well, the situation is much bigger than the euro of 16 or 17 countries. If you go wider and look at the European Union, which is 27 countries, 25 of those countries have breached the rules on debt and deficit. And then if you go even further to the USA, where virtually all the individual states are in difficulties or in bankrupt. I mean, California is actually printing what are effectively IOUs or post-dated checks. And so you have to say, how is it there's a situation, not just within the euro, not just within Europe, but much more widely? You're looking at a crisis of at least the Western, or virtually the global financial system. And just one point on this. If you take, say, Greece, which was in the headlines, the Greece national debt as a percentage of GNP was 115%. Yeah. When it has implemented the austerity measures, the debt will have increased to 150%. In short, the situation is out of control and the proposed measures are making it worse, and as a result there's going to be a crash of the euro.
John, what do you think about that? I mean, the thing is that everything they've tried to do, and Rodney is absolutely right, get out of debt, you go into debt. To find prosperity, you go into further and further debt, which it seems to me the only people that benefit out of all of this so far are the banks, okay? They're doing quite well through the whole thing. I mean, even when there is a run on a country, the banks really come out very, very well. I mean, they have not proposed any solid solutions to get out of this mess, and there's a lot of criticism for the Eurozone itself. You know, you can't do it country by country. You got to fix the whole thing if it's going to work.
Well, the bottom line, let's talk about the EU to start with, and the euro, is that this union was doomed to failure from the beginning. Thank goodness we never joined the single currency. But we now have a situation, of course, where, you know, they've tied the economy of Greece, say, for example, to Germany. Well, how can you possibly do that if you have the same, and if you don't have the same tax and the same benefit regime as well? That's what's going wrong. This is a political union, really, where they put the monetary union first. Whereas in the States, of course, when you had your union, you didn't start using the greenback for many, many years after the political union. Now, the fact is, we don't really want political union, certainly not in the EU Referendum Campaign. We, the British people, have never been asked whether we want to be in the United States of Europe. We were asked, did we want to be in a common market, a trading regime? Yes, we did back in 75, but do we want to be in it now? I say the British people must be given the choice, and 75% of British people in the latest poll agree with the EU Referendum Campaign. We should be asked, do we want to be in or out? Now, we've got a position. We've got students rioting on the streets yesterday, protesting on the streets of London, and they've been doing it for several weeks. Now, this will continue, because what's actually happened is we're increasing, or the government, the coalition government, is trying to increase education fees to go into higher education to £9,000 a year. We've had welfare benefit cuts of £7 billion. But that's the same amount of money, £7 billion sterling that we're going to give to Ireland to help them out of their present situation. And we're not even members of the Eurozone. I think people in Britain are getting very angry. It's a completely ridiculous situation. This was politics, this was Kohl, and this was Mitterrand, who wanted this massive union, and it is corrupt, it's a waste of money, and we want to vote on whether we stay in or not.
Okay, Rodney, you want to jump in there? Go ahead.
Yeah, a quick point there, which is that John referred to the £7 billion going from the UK to help the Irish situation. Now, behind that is the fact that Ireland owes the British banks £144 billion. And you see, it's the interlocking nature...
I agree with you completely.
No, John, hang on. It's the interlocking nature
I'm agreeing with you, Rodney,
of a
completely.
banking system which is totally out of control.
We are bailing out the Royal Bank of Scotland...
Keep going, guys.
We are bailing out the Royal Bank of Scotland, and we bailed them out just recently, about a year or 2 years ago. The British people were never asked about it. We bailed them out. We're now effectively bailing them out again, one of our biggest banks, because you're right, they're completely indebted to the Irish economy. That's what's behind this. This is what the British people haven't been told. It's a crisis in the banking industry, but it is also down to politicians and lax regulation. And I agree with you, Rodney, in your analysis that it's worldwide. It isn't just Europe. I'd agree with you.
Gentlemen, I think it's very, very interesting as I'm glad you brought in the comparison of the United States, because it seems to me over the last 2 years or so, countries can fail, okay? They can fail in a sense. Yeah. It's banks that can't fail. The banking system isn't allowed to fail. And that's one of the things that's very, very interesting here, is because it's saving the banks, and then it doesn't really care what's happening on the ground, because they're so far away from the people anyway. And they went in to save the banks of Greece. They went in to save the banks of Ireland, because it's all interconnected that way. So it really cuts away from the real economy. Go ahead, Rodney.
Yes, there is an elite, and unfortunately that elite's view of things is reinforced by mainstream neoclassical economics, which basically says the banks may create money, add administration costs and interest, and then can lend it for any reason, and that the more lending that they do, the efficiency purposes of the free market are being served, and the justice purposes are being served. Now, that is complete and utter lies. The whole thing is being exposed now as the debt is built too much. In America, they've got rid of all their jobs. They've never addressed the real economy. The whole thing is now coming down. And I'm afraid it's going to be very nasty. We're looking at 15, 20 years, and even then there may not be a solution.
Okay, I mean, we had a position, didn't we, where, Lehman Brothers was allowed to go pop in the United States, and one of our banks here, Northern Rock, a very small bank, which the first run was on, the government didn't allow that to go bust. Maybe they should have allowed that to go bust, because that was the beginning of the problem. That bank was bailed out. The other banks have been bailed out right across Western Europe, and in particular here in the UK. Those bankers now are paying those bonuses again. And at no point has the political elite of any party here in the United Kingdom actually spoken to the British people about this. And I think there's a massive disconnect, similar to what's happened in the States, Peter, with the Tea Party. There is definitely a disconnect between mainstream politicians of the major parties and the public, which is why I think the Tea Party actually got a lot of traction in your recent elections. And indeed, we need something like that here in the United Kingdom. And in a way, the EU Referendum Campaign, we're trying to fill that void by saying, listen, we must have a vote on the most important political question we've got at the moment in the UK, which is, do we want to be part of the EU? We're paying £48 million sterling per day to the EU. £48 million. 24,000 civil servants working in Brussels alone to back up these people in the European Commission and in the European Parliament. And as I say, the British people haven't been asked. And that's where the disconnect is. It's the political elite are looking after the banking system. And I think that's worldwide.
John, I think it's very interesting you mention this, because if you look at, the moneyed people, the banks in all through Europe and in the United States, during this financial crisis, it's been estimated that there's enough private capital out there. Private individuals and corporations have an enormous amount of money. Why can't they bail out their own? Why can't they bail out their own banks, okay? Because the money is out there. Because why should the taxpayer have to bail out the bad decisions that were made by the very rich, and they continue to be very rich? The recession's over for those folks. It's over completely for them. They're going just like it was before. Go ahead, Rodney. Go ahead.
Peter, that they will not. That rich capital actually exists privately in the USA, but they will not put it into the American economy because they rightly perceive that it will not get the reward they want. Right. They will therefore put it into the Chinese economy. Yep. And that's the same reason why they, in fact, have exported what are probably 6 or 7 million of jobs to countries like China or Indonesia, etc. Sure. And there's the fundamental problem. The arrogance which says only consider the interests of a small group of elite corporations, only consider the interests of the big banks. It's sold out mainstream America.
Yes.
Okay.
John, you want to jump? Go ahead.
And indeed, here in the United Kingdom, I've got friends who are developers and friends who are in business, you know, and they tell me stories where they'd go for a scheme a few years ago and they'd ask for £1 million on loan and they'd be offered £2 million by the banks. I've got a friend in Dublin at the moment. He went and asked for £100,000 for a very, very small development. He had an amazing 30-year business track record and the banks said no. They've completely reversed it. So the capital isn't there for small businesses to medium businesses to create jobs. And that's the worry at the moment. Meanwhile, we're funding and bailing out Ireland. We've now got a position here in Western Europe, of course, where even the German people who, and the population of Germany are saying, we don't want to bail out anybody else. Portugal's going to go next. It looks like Spain might go as well on the Iberian Peninsula. There just isn't enough money in the pot in the EU to keep bailing out these countries, which is why I say, let's have a referendum and let's get out of it. And I think the euro will collapse as a currency or go into a two-tier currency, perhaps with one sort of euro for countries like Germany, maybe even France, although reading in the papers this morning, they've got their own problems as well, and then another euro for the Mediterranean countries. This whole idea of a union between countries like Greece and Germany.
I want to talk about that a little bit later, but we're going to go to a break right now. After a short break, we'll continue our discussion on the euro. Stay with RT.